You ready? Let's do this.
It's a ninja legend. When a long sword is on top of a short sword and covered with a red cloth, it means a challenge. No one can turn down the challenge. You going to accept the challenge? You are, didn't you? Aren't you?
Hello, I'm Sabrina, aka Bria, aka the artist of the popular transgender themed webcomic Life of Bria. And now I've got my very own radio show. I'm broadcasting this one from my island hideaway at my mom's house. And so if there's any cats romping around or sounds, that's probably what it is. And it's very nice. I've been hanging out all week with my pal, Sophie Labelle.
Hey.
And I guess maybe I don't know, maybe Sophie Labelle's going to be on this podcast. You don't have to be, but we're just chilling.
I'll just be laughing in the background.
Yeah. And, but I've got, speaking of island hideouts, I have my very first guest from New Zealand joining me today, which really means a lot to me because that basically means he's from the future. So I kind of really appreciate him taking the time out of his busy future man schedule to come back here and talk to us primitives. Of course, I have joining me today the charming creator of the webcomic Rooster Tails, Sam Orchard. Sam, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's lovely. I can tell you that in the future it is sunny on a Monday. But maybe it won't be sunny on the other side of the world, actually.
Oh, yeah, it's been snowing and raining here. It's not the greatest. So I'm a little curious now. New Zealand weather, you guys are in the southern hemisphere. Is it your summer then, right now?
That's right. That's right. It's warming up and there's sunshine and the beach is kind of fun to go to, and yeah, it's lovely.
We were down the beach yesterday, and it was just a big storm.
Oh, no.
So yeah, that's a bit of a Canadian thing. I feel like to ask people about the weather. Really,
very safe topic to start with.
Well, yeah, it's safe. And actually, I was genuinely curious because I think people they see Lord of the Rings or whatever, but generally people I don't think actually know anything about New Zealand.
No, a lot of people think it's somewhere in Europe.
I guess was that because of the accent or what?
Zealand.
I think so. I think Zealand sounds kind of Dutch or something, maybe. I'm not sure.
New Zealand was an English colony originally, though, right?
Well, yeah, when it was colonized by the English.
Well, yeah, I say originally by original colonists.
Pretty sure Zealand is in the Netherlands, though.
Oh, yeah, the original Zealand. Yeah. Well, the Dutch and the English were like best buds during that whole time, so.
Yeah, that's right. And in Australia, it was kind of a race between the Dutch and the English to colonize Australia, so.
I remember that. I read a book that was all about the colonization of Australia. Very fascinating history. It just barely touched on New Zealand, though. It didn't talk about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Do you guys...
Well, New Zealand's so much smaller than Australia. There's kind of a rivalry going between the two. So I don't often tell people that I'm actually Australian.
Oh.
It's like I'm in the closet about it.
That's like one of my very most favorite shows ever, Flight of the Conchords. Is that a thing? Is that liked in New Zealand? How do people feel about Flight of the Conchords there?
Well, Flight of the Conchords wasn't super successful until Americans started liking it, and then New Zealanders were like, "Someone likes us, we'll like you too. This is fun."
That's such a wonderful, charming show, and of course, in that there's the great rivalry between them and the Australian embassy.
That's right. That's pretty much true to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is New Zealand like this very small, charming place they portray it to be then?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's lots of charm here. There's, the regular badness of colonization and conservative politics as well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that a bit just because I think it seems like there's some parallels between Canada and New Zealand. I guess they're both colonized nations. They both have indigenous populations that were put down by that, which I find a little interesting. You have people over here certainly that'll be like blaming Native folks for their troubles, but it's like, well, anywhere you go in the world, there's Native people that are having similar problems because colonists came and took over. It's almost as though the colonists are the problem, not the Native people.
I know, it's shocking for people that they can't get their heads around that.
I think there was one good thing. I guess we have international connections. We can look at other countries, and when you're living in your little bubble of like you've only ever seen Canada or your small town where you live, you kind of don't see the bigger picture of what causes problems in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's why I like talking with other webcomic artists, and it seems like that's been a big thing for you, is connecting with other unusual artists and learning from them and being inspired by them. Oh.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, comics seems like it's kind of an unusual art form in and of itself, which is what I like about it. Like, it's kind of, I talk about it like it's kind of queer because it's not really definable. It's kind of words and it's kind of pictures and it's kind of something else altogether. And like there's lots of different styles and ways to do comics, from web comics to your traditional editorial comics, so they can kind of take really different forms as well. And so for me it seems like the perfect home for a kind of queer, trans, gender strange person like myself.
Absolutely. It's just a space where you can basically do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
And I think that there's telling stories is such an important part of being real. Like when sort of mass media controls the narratives of identity so much, that having space and time to create your own outside of that is really important. So, yes.
So we're serious artists here, and we're talking all this serious artist stuff, but I'm sure, you have a lot of readers now. I'm assuming they want to know, like, the really important question, which is, what's your favorite dinosaur, Sam?
So I've been thinking about this. So you're going to ask, and I don't want to, like, jump on Julia Serrano's bandwagon, but Triceratops is my favorite. Yep. Also.
That's a very popular choice.
It's pretty traditional, but it seems like a good, sturdy, strange dinosaur. And I watched the Land Before Time comic cartoon when I was little.
Oh yeah, me too.
I really liked how bossy that Triceratops was.
Was it Sarah?
Yeah.
Oh man, she was a bitch.
I love it. I love her. So I feel like if I'm sort of like wanting to celebrate some sort of femme power bossiness through.
I could write an essay about that. That's I actually kind of feel like rewatching that film now. I watched it as a kid a lot. And I, of course, my feeling is there's two main camps. There's people who are Camp Triceratops and people who are Camp Tyrannosaurus. So I would watch that film, and I'm rooting for the sharp tooth. I thought it was ridiculous that a bunch of baby dinosaurs could take a full-grown Tyrannosaurus. That's ridiculous. Come on. No, they couldn't. I don't care if they use the power of teamwork or whatever. It's Tyrannosaurus Rex. Tyrant Lizard King. You can't beat it. It's like this. Also, there's such like this. We're talking about this wonderful femme power, but like Tyrannosaurus is like this embodiment of like macho, the dominating patriarchy, the tyrant lizard king.
We can only overthrow through teamwork / communism.
Well, I noticed actually that comes up a lot in your comics. There's little bits talking about capitalism. Would you say you'd consider yourself more like in this sort of communist collectivist view, or I'm interested in that now?
I think so. I think there's some. I mean, I'm not. I don't know what I would call myself, but I can see pretty clearly that there's some massive problems with the kind of white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy.
Yeah. I've been reading a lot of articles, sort of getting into the future, talking about as automation and artificial intelligence goes forward, like this thing can't even last, even if everything goes well and it somehow doesn't destroy itself. Like people can't keep working like this. Like this isn't a model that's sustainable in any way.
It seems it's a pretty scary world that we're living in at the moment. I was talking to my therapist about it the other day, and I was like, "It's just falling apart," and she was like, "Yeah, it is. It's pretty." And I was like, "You're supposed to make me feel better. You're not supposed to agree."
Well, they kind of do though. Their job a lot of the time is to kind of like support you. So I guess maybe they want to support you in your feelings, but it kind of feels that way. I wanted to actually ask about that because we got Donald Trump in the States. We've got various governments kind of taking up power in Europe. In Canada, they're spreading. The Conservative Party is acting like Donald Trump and talking about how they want to bring his message here. Neo-Nazi flyers are going out. Is that sort of thing, does it go on in New Zealand? Like, is that a thing? Or are you guys kind of safe?
No, we're not safe. We've had a conservative government for the last about 10 years. And we've got another election coming up next year, and I can see the beginnings of that sort of rhetoric starting to take shape.
That's not me. It's probably someone ordering a pie for my mom. My mom bakes pies for a living.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we totally have not been helping.
Pies like fruit pies.
Yeah, yeah, like apple pie. She's got all these fruit trees here, and she.
Nice.
Yeah, that's how she. I'm really proud of her. And sorry, I completely derailed this conversation talking about pie.
Pies seem a much better topic of conversation than Donald Trump, to be honest.
I guess suddenly this is the important thing we all have to talk about now. Like it's 2016, and apparently we have to deal with Nazis because a bunch of children don't want to grow up. And we were just talking about it.
It's astounding to me how much traction they're getting and the kind of symbolic power that they're kind of bolstered by things like Brexit and things like Trump getting elected. That feels suddenly much more in my face than the kind of bubbling undercurrent that has been happening for, I guess, the last however many years.
And I guess there are people who take the view, though, that it's kind of a good thing, bringing it up in the open. Maybe this can be the last stand where it finally gets eradicated. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a little scary.
It makes it obvious to people like my dad and stuff who haven't seen it or been confronted with it because they're in a nice kind of sheltered middle class house.
And that's just it. Like so many people, they don't support this openly or actively, but they live in their little bubble and they don't realize that this is a thing. And so they basically are complicit in it without realizing it. And that's where, was it that old classic quote was evil is only when good men allow bad things to happen or whatever? Like, it's basically, it's easy to get comfortable, especially if you don't face any kind of direct oppression. And so
yeah, that's right. And I think that's something I've been trying to go through my old Rooster Tails strips to have transcriptions so that people with visual impairments can use e-readers and stuff. And it's really interesting just looking back on my politics and how they've changed and like just the kind of latent transmisogyny that I perpetuated in the early comics that I'm like, oh man, and not even addressing like the differences between how a transmasculine person might be treated compared to a transfeminine person. And, like it's so easy to get stuck in your like safety bubble. It requires a lot of active work, I think, particularly, me, I'm occupying more space as a white man these days, which is kind of horrifying in and of itself. But I feel like I have to do a lot of making sure that I'm doing work and learning around what privileges I have access to.
That's a hard thing to confront. Nobody wants to, I guess, admit that they have unfair advantages or a part of some kind of this awful machine. And
Yeah, that's
it's easy
right.
to take it personally, and I think it's kind of have to divorce yourself from this feeling of like, you know, I don't know, like you take responsibility for it, but you also don't like, I guess, hate yourself for it either, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Because if you spend so much time hating yourself, then you're not doing the work anyway. You're
Yeah.
just, and I think people struggle with that feeling of like, if I'm perpetuating racism, that means I'm racist and therefore bad. And it's like, no, if you're perpetuating racism, it's because we live in a racist society and it's really hard not to do that. You just have to work really hard not to do it.
And I think so many of these things, like I'm a big fan of like evolutionary biology and these sort of ideas about natural selection, and just things kind of just have a way of perpetuating themselves, and it's because no one's thinking about it. It's basically a blind process that causes society to remain racist even though the majority of the people aren't even aware it's racist, you know?
Yep.
And that's why it's important to do this sort of work, and now dismantle this blind process, because that's a lot of people get really like, when you start talking about evolution, they're like, oh, it's like you're Nazi eugenics or something, you're justifying it. Like, no, it's not justifying it. Lots of bad stuff happens in nature. It doesn't make it good. This process, this society doesn't have our best interests in mind. It only cares about itself, perpetuating its own self, and that's why we have to actively dismantle it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why it feels so uncomfortable and so yuck, because we have to actively work against it, and we'll always make mistakes because we're not programmed to be kind, generous people.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole empathy thing. I feel like, I don't know, like since I transitioned, especially just becoming aware of the different struggles that all sorts of different people face, and just having some degree of empathy. Whereas I think a lot of, say, cis people who never have to go through this, they don't ever have to look at it. So it's easy for them to not feel for other people.
Yeah. I think if you haven't had to question yourself or been up against oppression, it becomes really hard to see other people's oppressions.
Mm-hmm. For sure. This is kind of reminding me of one comic I saw of yours that kind of resonated with me. It was about talking about like wanting to support people who are kind of making that incremental change in through the system, and those who are wanting to tear shit down. I'm kind of curious, who do you see yourself as?
I don't know. I feel like I'm different things at different points. At the moment, what I'm trying to do is do cooking. Like, I'm so anxious and I don't like people, so doing the kind of frontline protesting thing feels really hard for me to do. But making hummus and delivering food packages to people who do that work feels really like something I can offer and fills me up as much as supports other people. So I feel like that's what I'm trying to do at the moment, is to try and support the people who are doing that frontline work, because I do think that for me that's the most compelling place to be, and the people who I feel most connected to are doing that. The stuff that gets them yelled at and gets them hateful comments on their YouTube channels, it gets because they're pointing out stuff that people don't want to see. And so, yeah, for me, I want to support those people. Because I know that I can't do that stuff and survive.
Well, those people are also in many ways the most vulnerable of these different.
Yeah.
Like last week on the podcast, Sophie, Jessica, and I were talking about, well, it's sort of my idea I love to bring up to make myself seem really smart. And I'm going to do it now because I'm so smart. This idea that there's three sort of main prongs of affecting change, where you've got like the inside people, government, legislation, that kind of stuff. It is like, it's the system we live in, so it's kind of essential. But it never makes any change unless it gets pressure put on it, say from activists, who are this sort of external, I call it like the hard approach, where they're, making people uncomfortable, protesting, all these things. And then the other final prong is media. where you
Yeah.
are affecting change by changing popular opinion, making things normalized, and just sort of pointing things out in this sort of soft approach. It's almost like infiltrating people's minds, which
Yeah.
makes it sound really sinister, but it's more like, I think people can put up barriers, like they see activists and they clash with them, and they're like, they double down, you know?
Yeah.
And they kind of you need a back door sometimes to get in past that fortress they've built up and, you know, make them see why the activists do what they do.
Yeah. It's really interesting at the moment because I am looking like a man these days, and I look like a gay man, and all these kind of cis white gay men suddenly have started listening to me in a way that they haven't before, which is gross, but also kind of a wonderful in to be like, hey, yeah, now I'm in your club. Let's talk about trans misogyny and racism, guys.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to listen to me, which is, again, kind of gross, but also I feel like as a white person I need to talk to other white people about racism so that people of colour aren't always having to do that work.
Oh, yeah.
And as a masculine person I need to be talking about trans misogyny because it shouldn't have to rely on trans women or trans feminine people to have to always be doing that work.
Mm-hmm. If you've got that influence in society, you might as well use it. It's like there's that famous picture, I think it's Patrick Stewart, where he's like, in society people only seem to listen to if you're an old white man, so I'm going to use that to, you know, help girls or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You've got this power, so you can use it for good, hopefully.
Yeah, and I feel compromised in that, in terms of
it's so shitty that that's the world we live in, where you have to have that power to have anything happen. That's power at all. Like, we're all supposed to be equal rights, but, you know, a white man can have more power than a black trans woman.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
That's ridiculous. But it's also, I kind of want to get into talking about trans visibility and feelings about passing. But sort of before we get directly on that, it's still on this note of like having an in with society. It's like, I feel these very mixed feelings about a lot of trans female, I guess, spokespeople. They end up being like very attractive for the most part, conventionally passing. And society wants to see that. And in some ways it's really important for society to see that because there's these stereotypes of a man in a dress and all these awful visions. And so it's kind of important to show that no, trans women can just look the way you expect them to. But not all trans women do look that way or want to look that way, and that should be okay too. And how do you find a balance between those things? You know?
There's some sort of fundamental underlying thing that's like, all trans people want to look like cis people. Yeah. Which is, you know, a lot of us do. But, and some trans people don't. And neither set of people has more value than the others.
I think though, like, people do have something wired into them where they like somebody who looks like themselves. So again, like if you're white, you're talking to other white people, there's a good chance they'll listen to you just because we automatically, and if you're attractive in the way that people are usually wanting people to be, you know, a good looking woman, you know, handsome man, these things, it's sad, but you know, people aren't nearly as smart as we act like we are, and we have all these things influencing us that we don't want to admit totally influence our opinions. And I guess we might as well use them. But it is a bit of a dead end, you know?
Yeah, it is. I'm thinking about that a lot lately because I've kind of been on hormones for a couple of years now and passing so much more consistently, and I feel like more of my femness and my genderqueerness feels really good and something that I want to assert more, and like wearing more dresses and that sort of stuff feels really nice for me, whereas pre going on hormones that was like the worst thing in the world to do.
Oh yeah, I feel like I've been going through a similar process as well, for sure, although I don't think I'm at a point where I could ever embrace like masculine body features. Like I've got all kinds of dysphoria and crap, as so many of us do, but just I don't know, on principle, a person should be allowed to do those things, and it shouldn't be a problem. How insane is it that a man can get beaten up for wearing a dress? Like, Stop and think about that for a second. A person will beat you up because they don't like the clothes you're wearing.
I know, and it's like talking to young trans guys who won't, their parents won't let them cut their hair.
Yeah.
They're like, no, that's too far. That's going too far. It's like, it's hair. It's already dead.
Mm-hmm. It will grow back, by the way, kids.
Yeah,
Not sure if
that's
they're
right.
aware of this.
And like, there's lots of people of all genders who have short hair. It's not gonna magically change your personality. What? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, well, people hold on to these things, especially parents. They're afraid of losing their kid and stuff, and they just, I don't know. There needs to be some education of showing people that you're not losing your kid.
Yeah, that's right.
You're gaining a happy kid is what you're gaining.
Yeah, that's right. You're ensuring that your kid is going to stay alive.
And just also, one thing I'd like to talk about more is just like people should realize that children are like also people. They're not little toys for you to play with. And like, it's just the individual needs to have the right to determine their own identity, and it's nobody else's business.
Yeah. And to play with it, and to be serious with it, and to test things out and try things on. Like, I think we're always doing that, and we should have more freedoms to do that, whatever age.
This is kind of reminding me of the very first comic that started Rooster Tails off. I thought it was such a beautiful little story. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Which one?
The rooster in the yard. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
So my partner's parents live on a farm, and they were kind of coming to terms with Joe's gender and transition and stuff. And one of the ways that they talked about that we could tell that they had kind of like got some level there was the story that they told about this strange bird that wandered onto their farm, and that they were like, we thought it was a chicken, but then maybe it's a rooster, we don't know. And the kind of story is about that this chicken wanders into this backyard, and suddenly it starts to kind of grow tail feathers, and apparently only roosters do that, and starts to do its cockle-doodle-doo thing. And then they're like, oh, maybe it's not a straightforward chicken. And I've since found out that actually, if you have too many hens in a brood or whatever it's called, that one will quite often transition and become the kind of rooster of the pack, which is kind of interesting. That there's kind of like transgender animals around.
Mm-hmm. Lionesses do this similar things. They'll grow manes and.
Really?
Yeah. It's
awesome.
I'm not sure, I guess, what function it must serve within the society of chicken society, say. Perhaps they want a protector, maybe one just wants to be the dominant one.
Yeah. I mean, chickens do have that kind of pecking order hierarchy.
Yeah.
Really, it's quite important for their social structures, so interesting.
But I just thought that was such a beautiful story, because also, like, just this ambiguity is like, was it a rooster, or was it a chicken that became a rooster, or like, it was just like, it didn't matter. It is who it is. And
that's right. And there's something that was nice about Joe's parents offering us that story to be like, isn't it funny? We see this happening all the time, and it's okay.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. This sort of got me thinking about just like those little moments, like in our childhoods and our lives that, like, I just have memories of just being like seeing a video at the video store that would have something to do with trans stuff or something, and like these just little glimpses of future things to come that you don't quite understand when you're a kid. And they build up.
And you know that they're important, but you don't know why.
Yeah. And I imagine that would be such a sort of formative thing to have happen with seeing an animal that defies expectations like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I like that about your work. You have a lot of autobiographical stuff, but so much of it is just like slice of life, just like you being you, it's not directly about trans stuff. It's what I call it
Yeah.
casually trans.
I think that's a reaction to the media that tells the story that's like, this is a trans, and this trans has transed,
Yeah.
and all the things that they do is trans. It's like, sometimes I just go to the toilet, and it's just me going to the toilet.
Mhm.
The toilet becomes a quite trans important space as well. But like going for a walk, I'm just a person.
Yeah.
And the transness is really important for that, but it's also not important at all. And it's like, I feel like part of what I'm trying to do is create more spaces and more spaciousness about what it means to be trans. That, yes, we've got some really important stuff that we're needing to do, and we're also human beings.
Absolutely. And we've been talking a lot. I think we mentioned it last podcast, and just any artist I talk to who deals with trans things, we often want to talk about other stuff outside of trans stuff, but it's hard to get away from it because it's expected of us, and there's a huge hunger for it. Trans people want more trans representation.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, there's an article recently Julia Serrano did about how it was lots of different things about political correctness and stuff, and there's just one sort of little passage that really resonated with me, where she was talking about how, like, I would really like to stop talking about how I'm trans. I love that. But unfortunately, I don't have that luxury because there's a whole world of people out there who hold it against me. And so we now have to. The responsibility is apparently on us now.
Yeah. And it becomes, I really struggle with how to talk about, like, what I noticed in New Zealand, we had a big push for gay marriage, and that came through a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But a lot of the rhetoric was around, like, we're normal, therefore we deserve the same as you. We're just like you.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that because it had a kind of undercurrent of, like, difference is inherently bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're like bad queers, then we don't deserve to get married.
Well, it's just, on principle.
There's no discussion about how marriage is a kind of fucked up thing anyway.
Yeah. But just, it's like, on principle, you shouldn't have to be normal, quote unquote, to do anything. Like, as long as you're not hurting anybody, what's the problem?
Yeah, exactly.
But then there are people who are just, like, quote unquote normal, and I'm sure they'd like to just be allowed to do their normal person stuff or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's great if you want to be normal, and I think it should be just as great if you want to be different as well, or if you are different. And so I struggled with that in my comics of, like, how do I talk about my everyday regular life that's not normal? It's just my life.
Yeah.
And use it to not try and be like, see, I'm just like you, therefore I deserve rights, but to say, hey, here's all the different ways that I'm different, and here's all the different ways that you might connect with me because of that difference or sameness.
It's got that human core, like, you're the same in that you laugh and cry and love and all these things that matter, Like, these are things that no matter who you are, if you're some radical queer or whatever, you're still going to feel love and other emotions, and that enough is like a connection with other humans for them to be like, okay, I can understand you enough that I would never want to harm you. I don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, these I think these little glimpses are really powerful that you offer people. Just your life, I don't know. It's like vulnerability almost. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you feel vulnerable doing it, or do you feel empowered by it, or?
Absolutely.
Because you talk about personal stuff like therapy and stuff.
Yeah, and there's sometimes I put stuff up and I'm like, oh my gosh, was that an overshare? That's embarrassing.
Yeah, but it's a fine balance because I think people really appreciate it when you share something super personal.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. Usually the ones that I feel most vulnerable about and most like, oh, if I say this, will people get offended or think that I'm just bizarro? Is this bad? then usually they're the ones that I get lots of comments of people saying, "Oh yeah, this is exactly like me," and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
wow.
Well, that's just
So
it.
it's so
Everything.
affirming.
Oh, thanks, hon. Everything that you have that you think that nobody else feels is a thing that a bunch of other people have that they also thought nobody else felt. And so when you share it, they're going to feel it and be happy that they're not alone.
Yeah.
It's just like being trans. I wanted to ask you, so we're talking about the internet and sharing things with like each other. And that was such a big force for, I think, trans people, just being able to connect with other people and know that this is a thing and you're not alone, you know?
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend of mine who transitioned in the 90s, and even then, there's no internet then. You just, and she did it later in life growing up. You do not know if anyone else in the world is like you, and you think maybe you're a freak or whatever. And now we have this wonderful force connecting us, and you can see all these role models and these comics and
Yeah. It's so, internet is such a funny place because for me it feels like it's given me so much goodness, and I've been able to learn so much and see myself reflected and learn from like stuff that I need to work on when I see that reflected in a yuck way.
mm-hmm.
But also, like, it becomes it's also a site for like massive bullying as well.
Oh yes. Do you deal with that a fair bit, or?
No, I think, and I put that down to trans misogyny, is that, and misogyny, like most of the women webcomic artists I know get, whether they're trans or cis, get relentless bullying, and I managed to avoid that. And that's, my comic is very small, but I think it's also a lot to do with masculine and male privilege.
Yeah. Well, it's very telling that these people who are, quote unquote anti-trans just seem to pretend that trans men don't even exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, like, they don't want to talk about intersex or non-binary people. Like, those don't exist.
No, because it makes it so obvious that their politics and their interpretation is just so fundamentally flawed and wrong.
Yeah. It's strange. Like, I think with the whole bullying thing, we've been talking about like whether it actually is a large quantity of people or if it's just the internet is a funnel of all the bad people in the world can be dumped on you at once. Like, the vocal minority.
Yeah, and I think it's a real pack mentality as well. It seems to be that you get, like, there's a little horde of them that come in little droves, and they'll go and attack one person at a time really terribly, and then they'll move on to another place because it's safety in their little numbers.
Yeah. Just so bizarre that somebody would even spend their time on that. Like, what are they doing with their lives? I don't know.
No, it just makes no sense to me how they have that much poison that they want to share around.
I mean,
and that they feed off. Ugh.
I just assume it must be coming from an emotional place. They've got something that upsets them in their life, something that they're repressing. Who knows if they're gay or trans or what have you. They just have something that they're not happy about, and so they have to respond in this sort of vicious way to other people. Like, because, like, quote unquote, normal people don't do this. They do realize this, right? Other people don't go around the internet attacking people. That's not a thing that other people do.
Yeah.
But I don't want to dwell too much on them. They already get too much energy. I'd rather talk about fun stuff. I want to, like, what artists have influenced you?
I'm really excited about Alison Bechdel.
She's great. I read her Fun Home in university. I love that.
Yeah, she's so good. I've got her Dykes to watch out for complete set.
Oh, wow.
And
a new one just came out, I think.
It's so relevant. Like, the stuff that she talks about just keeps funneling around. And I like that she discusses, like, biphobia and transphobia within that. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, like, seems to me like she's figuring it out for herself and working out what she wants to say. And it's reassuring to me that she uses comics to learn and grow and tell herself off sometimes. And
Do you feel you've done that in your work at all? Have you sort of explored and grown?
I feel like I have explored and grown. I think I need to tell myself off more, for sure. I've got some much bigger learning to do. But, yeah, I try to take lessons from her.
Who else has inspired you then?
Who else? I really like Erica Moen's stuff, and I know that she's not well liked by a lot of trans people.
I don't know her, to be honest.
She does a comic called Oh Joy Sex Toy and had previously done Dia, which was an autobio webcomic. And I really I appreciate her vulnerability and learning and trying to make stuff around sex positivity and sex toys and sex inclusive and large and happy and fun as well, from like non-normative bodies and non-normative ways of doing sex, because I think we have such a culture of not being able to talk about sex in any way that's outside of a kind of moralistic, kind of puritanical way.
And also these orthodoxies, again, about like what a body is supposed to be like or how you're supposed to use it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so much of it is just like enjoying what your body can do and playing with that. And like, it's almost like dancing, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, it's pretty telling that the people who are often very much anti-sex or prudish like that also don't like dancing.
What?
Yeah, Puritans. Yeah, if you look at history, you look at the Calvinists and the Puritans and all those awful sects. I think even in very fundamentalist Islam countries today, it's like dancing, nuh-uh. But sex also, colorful clothing, certain foods. These people don't like fun and they don't like exploring.
I went and saw a talk by Alice Walker. She came to New Zealand a year or two ago, and she talked about one of her books, which is called Hard Times or something, Call for Furious Dancing. And I thought that was such a nice thing of like when you're feeling, and she talked about kind of when she was feeling really messed up about the world, that she just rented a barn and invited everyone to come and dance with her. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a, because I do think dance is such an important thing for us to be able to do, and fun, and particularly in times when we're being attacked.
I in my old life was far too uptight to ever allow myself to dance, and I was in martial arts, you know, that was my background. I worked as a teacher for many years. And there's a lot of different karate experts who are like, there's little quotes that you'll see in some inspirational book where they're talking about how important dancing and rhythm is. Bruce Lee was a cha-cha champion in Hong Kong. And, but like I found, like after, of course, transitioning, I loosened up and wasn't so uptight. And I allowed myself to be able to dance. And it made my martial arts better. Because dancing is just this pure, unrestricted movement where you're not afraid of making a fool of yourself. And you can just move and be free. And then you can do anything. You know? And then
silliness is so important.
Exactly. And there's almost like, I think it's trapped in this kind of toxic masculinity of being afraid of making a fool of yourself. And, you know, like you don't want to look feminine in any way. You don't want to look weak in any way. You always have to be in control. And I mean, guys are allowed to joke around, but it's a very different sort of thing. You're not allowed to have that true vulnerability. And dancing allows you to have that.
It reminds me of another comic artist that I really like, or artist really. Her name's Linda Barry, and she talks a lot about silliness and childishness and how important it is that we kind of get that pushed out of us, that we get told that we have to want to be an adult and being an adult is good, but actually being silly and dancing and drawing and exploring is really important.
Sorry, I was just dealing with stream issues here. I think we had an interruption to the stream, but we're going now. One thing I know for a fact that you're into, and I just past week was brought into by Jessica Nightmare with Steven Universe.
Yes.
I never watched it before.
Yes.
And it's great. I love that's this idea of also again that sort of feminine power,
Yeah.
and not being afraid to be weak or whatever, not being afraid to be sensitive. But there's this strength there.
Yeah, that's right. That I feel like a lot of that show is around how vulnerabilities are one of your greatest strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's being confused or being frightened or being unsure what to do, then that becomes the place where you can be your most powerful. So good.
Yeah, I was blown away. I'd seen little snippets and I was kind of like, what's the big deal about this? But like Jessica was like, no, you have to watch it. And so we all watched like 30 episodes of it last week. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm hooked. It's great.
It's so good. Sorry.
Go on. Continue your thought. We'll do mine after.
I was going to say that there's so many good different types of feminine people in Steven Universe's life. Like, I feel like all the different... Because it seems like all the gems are women.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different ways of doing that, which is so great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I find myself resonating with different aspects of each character, which is rare.
Yeah.
Like I can see bits of myself in all the different gems that have come up so far. And they just feel so real, and it's a really well done show overall.
Yeah.
Which crystal gem do you think you resonate most with? I mean, I got you drawn as Steven, and you drew yourself as Steven, but...
Yeah, I feel like I definitely relate to Steven the most. He's the one who I want to be. He's my role model at the moment.
He's got that great carefreeness to him. And...
Yeah. And Lapis. I feel like I also relate to Lapis.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're up to that episode. But
yeah, she showed up briefly. She was sort of a villain, not in the one or two of it she's in.
Yeah. She has this... There's a deep sadness in her that I really like. And that she can't quite figure out how to be nice because she's got so much trauma and sadness around.
Oh my, yeah. That's pretty real. That's, I think, a lot of people, hopefully... Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of people, they won't realize that they relate to that because a lot of people, they're so repressed, they don't realize why they have a hard time, reaching out to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. I'm definitely going to keep watching it.
Yay.
So we haven't talked about your art a whole lot. I want to know more about your process. I was told by a certain pink-haired cartoonist that you do everything by hand with real ink and that you color your art with a mouse like a caveman. Is this true?
What? I never said that.
Well, I add the caveman in. Just like the Amish folks used to do their comics.
I sit in a cold room with a single candle that I light, and I dip the pen into some ink. And I do draw everything by hand. I thought about doing it on the tablet, but I just don't like. I just don't like the lack of control I have that I feel like I have with pen and ink.
I'm not. I've been away all month, but normally my strips are all done with real pen and ink too. So I'm really happy to find out that you do it that way.
Oh yay! Hold on, there's a knock on my door. I'll be right back.
No problems. Yeah. Just gonna go make a song. Do. Waiting for Sam. Answering the door.
We don't have the guitar here, right?
Oh, we don't have a guitar. Otherwise, Sophie could play for us. There used to be tons of guitars in this house, but I think my brother took them all. Who, by the way, wrote the theme song for this show. Yeah, my brother did that for me. He's absolutely wonderful. I love you, bro. He I actually kind of like to have his band on the show sometime. He plays in the I guess you'd call it progressive metal band Opus Arise. Everything good?
Everything good. Just someone trying to collect some money for me.
Oh, and you just tell him to get out of here.
Sorry, don't have any money.
I'm an artist.
Give me money.
But do you use then like crow quill pens? Do you use brushes or?
I use this little kind of, it's a mix between a brush and a pen, so it's called a brush pen.
I love brush pens. Is it the Pentel one?
It's a Tombow one.
I don't know.
I do use the Pentel one sometimes, but I feel like I haven't got that good at control with that enough.
That's like my favorite purchase I've ever made in my life was my Pentel brush pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Love it.
It feels like it's quite sexy or something to just be.
Do you ever work with
movements which don't actually work for sound radios?
I quite love though. I use my sable hair Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. That's like inking in heaven. That's the best thing. I couldn't recommend it highly enough.
It sounds that name kind of sounds like something you'd get in Harry Potter from Ollivander's.
Yeah. Some magical beast's hair makes your inking much better. No, I don't. It's actually really hard to get sable hair brushes. I think that's, I guess, illegal, which, like, I feel like such a piece of crap for using it because I totally wouldn't wear fur. But I guess I'm okay with some poor animal's hair being torn out to make brushes. But it makes a really good brush, okay? You don't understand. My drawings look slightly less messy because...
I have to investigate.
Yeah, I highly recommend working with those kind of brushes. I want to ask more about just like so you color though with a mouse though, right? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I color it in on the computer, and I do have a tablet.
Oh, okay.
But it's really old and it breaks down, so I can do it with a mouse. It just takes longer.
We were talking just briefly about the sort of similarities and differences between New Zealand and Canada. And I'm kind of interested in how living in New Zealand has influenced you as an artist. Like, can you see differences, like when you talk to other English-speaking artists, like other colonies? Do you feel like New Zealand gives you a very unique perspective on the world?
Yeah, I think here no one in New Zealand does comics because they think it will make them a lot of money or any money. Most of the people in the comics community here, bar maybe one or two, have to have other jobs because there's just no money to be made. There's no kind of industry per se. So all of us who do it because we have to. Like, if there's something inside of us that says, you got to do this.
Yeah.
Or we love it so much that we got to do it. So I think which I think is different in most other places, that you can actually make money off your comics. And I think there's, what else? I mean, in terms of gender stuff and how I conceptualize of gender, it feels like New Zealand is a really interesting place because of the Indigenous people, both of New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, have a quite different and non-binary way about talking about gender and sexuality that is quite mixed together and fluid and both and rather than either or. Which I feel like
it can be useful to have these outside perspectives and not just taking certain things for granted.
Yeah, and I feel like it kind of resists an academic analysis because you can't, it's just something that you can't use words to describe, which I quite like. I feel like that feels really good and important to acknowledge.
So, do you work on anything outside of Rooster Tails? Do you have other projects that you're kind of got in the works?
Yeah, I'm doing a kids book at the moment.
Oh, I saw that comic about that. Yeah, you briefly mentioned that.
And Sophie is doing one as well.
I am. I'm
Yeah,
excited about it.
She showed
Very
me some
excited.
advanced drawings last night. It was pretty
But
good.
we're doing a Kickstarter to try and get the funds
To get that going. Oh no, did we break up? I can see you still, Sam.
I can hear you, but you're kind of cutting in and out. I'll just see if
well, I can try turning off my video here. How's that?
Yeah, that seems to be working.
Okay, we'll finish up without video. I already know. I got a nice picture of your face here anyways, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, well, we'll definitely, you should send me the link to all that stuff, your Kickstarter. I have your website.
Cool, yeah.
Your website's just roostertails.com, right? For people who are,
roostertailscomic.com.
yeah, people who are listening, check that out right now. I'm going to put links to that, your Patreon, your Kickstarter. Is there anywhere else people can find your work?
I have a Tumblr. I think it's just samorchard.tumblr.
Okay. Well, we'll put all that in.
And Twitter is Sam_Orchard.
Oh, yeah, I've been doing Twitter stuff. I just kept looking for like Rooster Tails stuff. So I've just been no label for you on Twitter, unfortunately.
I'm not consistent. Sometimes I'm Rooster Tails and sometimes I'm Sam Orchard.
It's hard though, like with Twitter especially. Like I don't know. I haven't figured Twitter out.
Yeah.
I think you have to be on there constantly tweeting.
Yeah, definitely. And because, like, my other job when I'm not cartooning is doing resource design as well, so, and I don't always work with people who are trans literate, so I try and keep it. That's why I do Sam Orchard rather than Rooster Tails, even though I always tweet about trans stuff anyway, because I'm obsessed. That's all I ever talk about.
Well, it's an important thing. I mean, we keep coming back to it because these issues don't get resolved. We keep basically pounding our heads against the wall.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel, I don't know, like in my illustration work that I do, I don't tell people I'm trans. They don't know who I am. Yeah. And I feel a little conflicted about that. Do you have those sort of feelings? Like, are you very open when you work with these other people in your other job, or?
Less and less so, which is interesting. Just because I feel like it wasn't, if I talked about being trans before, it was usually to say, I'm Samuel, use he pronouns.
Oh, yes.
And now that I'm passing more, I feel like I'm kind of weirdly back in the closet. And so it becomes a kind of nice little bomb I can drop on people sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's a nice strategic bomb. And other times I just feel like unsafe to do so I don't.
Yeah, well, ultimately, it's nobody else's business. And that's like, we didn't get to talk about as much as I'd hoped to. We can go a little overtime if we have to, too. But trans visibility, about just like, there's all this about like, oh yeah, we got to be out there and proud, but it kind of puts us in the crosshairs more now, too. And because you did this comic about it, right? About Trans Day visibility, and I can let you describe it more, but it really resonated with me.
Yeah. I feel like if you're asking people to be visible, then it becomes a really hard thing to do, because it's basically saying, hey, here I'm a target for you. Like, let's get visible about the things that need to change rather than asking individuals to bear the vulnerabilities of that. Mm-hmm.
And it's a hard thing, going back to the people who say they want to pass or they want to be cis. Like, we're not asking for any of this conflict. We didn't.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want my whole life to be a battle all the time.
That's right.
Even though it's an important battle to fight, it's like you need to just like have these spaces where like my life can just be my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And we shouldn't be asking particularly the most vulnerable people in our communities to constantly be at the front lines, because sometimes they just want to be able to sleep and to recuperate and to have a healing space and a quiet space. Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's easy to get burned out with these things, and I hope you keep going steadily on your comic. You don't get burned out. Does it have a fixed date? It gets updated?
Supposedly.
Yeah.
It's sometime on Wednesday, usually.
Okay.
It changes depending on how busy my week is.
Well, I'll keep my eye out for it. And I guess we'll wrap up here. It's been an hour. Thank you so much for coming on, Sam. And thanks to everybody for listening.
So much.
I feel bad. I think that the stream got interrupted at some point, so I don't know how much we were broadcasting, but this has all been recorded, and this will go out probably tonight. I'll try to upload it. And yeah, I hope I get to talk to you again soon. And I feel like there's so much more we could have talked about. All right, so we'll sign off here. I guess you and I can stay on the line for a sec. And thanks to everybody for listening. Tune in next week. I'm going to have robot hugs on my show.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I'm a little stoked about that. And keep your ears open, I guess, for this podcast. And also, I need to update the Jessica Durling video because apparently there's a problem with it. So, all you people who listened to it and didn't tell me, thanks a whole bunch. I really appreciate it. But thanks so much, everybody. See you next time. Bye.